What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 60 wide receiver rankings for the fantasy football season. I've already gone through the top 60 running backs. Tomorrow, I'll have quarterback and tight end rankings. I'm going to try to make this one a little bit quicker. This isn't going to be super in-depth on every player. We're getting closer to the season, more of a quick hitter video for you guys. And then if you want my full top 200 rankings, the link will be in the description. It's free for you guys. You can make your own copy of the Google Sheet. Take it into your drafts if you would like. But let's just dive right into the rankings here. And starting off in tier 1, in a tier by himself, I have Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase is my clear-cut 101. He was clearly the top wide receiver last year. He's in a very similar situation with great quarterback play with Joe Burrow. This is going to be a high-scoring offense with a poor defense where they're going to be in a lot of pass-heavy game scripts, some shootouts. I like Ja'Marr Chase here in tier 1. Then in tier 2, I have CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. I do pretty clearly have CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver too. He's showcased that elite 23-plus point per game ceiling. I certainly think he'll be in contention to be the wide receiver 1 overall. We've seen, Dak support a high-end wide receiver 1. I do think this passing attack is going to look a lot better, especially with George Pickens coming in, kind of taking some of the pressure off. And then for Justin Jefferson, I don't think he has quite as good of a situation as Chase or Lamb, but he's arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. He's so talented. He has a very, very high floor, and so maybe he can't compete with like the 23-plus point per game ceiling of Chase or Lamb, but you feel very good with Justin Jefferson as your wide receiver 1 in the first round. Then moving into tier 3, I have Puka Nacua leading this tier, and I will say that if Matthew Stafford didn't have any back concerns, I would have Puka firmly in tier 2 and like really, really close with Justin Jefferson, like potentially making a move for Puka ahead of Jefferson. If Matthew Stafford can stay healthy, I'm very high on Puka Nacua. Would have averaged over 21 points per game last year if you just take his full healthy games. You remove the one where he left with injury, and then the one where he was ejected in the first half. Even with those games in his game log, he was still the wide receiver 2 in points per game. He is extremely talented. He is going to be the number 1 target on this team on a high-scoring offense, like Puka Nacua leading this tier. Then I've had a lot of fluctuation with the rest of this tier 3. At this point, I have Malik Nabers after Puka Nacua. I just want to bet into the talent of Malik Nabers. Yeah, he doesn't have as good of a situation as Amon-Ra or Nico Collins, but I think he might be the best wide receiver within this tier. He's going to command a ton of volume. And, maybe this offense looks a little bit better and Jackson Dart plays well, or Russell Wilson could be an upgrade over what they had last year. I think Nabers is someone who can have like that efficient, big play upside. Last year, it was really just the volume. I think he'll have the volume. We'll see if he can see an uptick in touchdowns and just those big plays here in 2025. Then someone who I recently moved up, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think I was getting a little bit too caught up in like the true peak upside and forgetting that Amon-Ra is just such a safe option, and it's not like he has a low ceiling. This guy's hit 20 PPR points per game. He's the number 1 target on a good offense. He's going to command a lot of volume, a very solid back end of round 1 pick. Then I have Nico Collins. I do think there are some concerns with this Texans offense, especially the offensive line, but I'm a big believer in Nico Collins. I think he's a very talented wide receiver, big play threat. I like CJ Stroud. He's the clear-cut number 1 weapon, and he really did start off last season on an absolute tear before he suffered his hamstring injury. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. Very impressive rookie season, a little bit overshadowed because of Malik Nabers, but like in any other year, this would have been insanely impressive for a rookie. Was an absolute league winner down the stretch. Buying into this offense, big believer in Liam Cohen. Think we see a career year out of Trevor Lawrence, and BTJ has got to be in the tier with the rest of these dudes. Now moving into tier 4, these are like our round 2, early round 3 guys. I have Drake London, AJ Brown, Ladd McConkey, T. Higgins, and Tyreek Hill. For Drake London, I do like his upside, being the number 1 weapon for the Falcons. If we see a big Michael Penix season, we could see Drake London break into like that mid to high end wide receiver 1 territory. AJ Brown, a little bit of a lower ceiling, but I think he has some upside if Saquon Barkley were to go down. But just from like a baseline expectation, he's going to be a solid back-end wide receiver 1. He's an extremely talented wide receiver, just not on like a super high-volume passing attack to really take him to the next level. Then I have Ladd McConkey, my wide receiver 11. Really strong rookie season, just like BTJ, had a really impressive close. Number 1 target for Justin Jefferson, really strong round 2 pick. And then guys more going in like that early round 3 range. T. Higgins, wide receiver 5 last year, lacks that true like nuclear upside because he is the number 2 weapon, but can't sleep on the guy who literally was just the wide receiver 5 in points per game. And then for Tyreek Hill, I got to say the vibes have been a little bit off with the Dolphins, but you have to acknowledge the ceiling where in 2023, this guy was like a true league winner, absolute monster, high end wide receiver 1. Last year was underwhelming, but he had some injury concerns. It's not great that he's heading into this year with an injury. I feel like if I could do a mini tier between 4 and 5, Tyreek Hill would fill in there. But I do think he's a little bit closer to like T. Higgins than the guys that I have at the start of tier 5. And tier 5 is going to be a little bit of a larger tier. This is Devontae Adams, JSN, Mike Evans, Xavier Worthy, Garrett Wilson, Tedero McMillan, George Pickens, Marvin Harrison Jr., and then Travis Hunter. I think the theme of this tier is kind of buying more into the higher upside guys than the players that are maybe more of like those floor options. So Devontae Adams, even as a wide receiver 2 in an offense, we have seen Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp both be super productive, playing together. I think Devontae Adams is a significantly better player than what Cooper Kupp was putting out there last year. So I think both Puka and Devontae Adams could end up being wide receiver 1s in points per game. Then I have JSN, and I was a little bit out on JSN, but I've kind of rebought into just him being like a PPR, like scammy wide receiver where he's going to command a lot of volume. The Cooper Kupp, addition, I don't love it. I feel like they have overlapping skill sets, but I also think that JSN is just the better player at this point in his career. And so I feel like he should be the guy who kind of like out alphas Cooper Kupp for the usage that, he's best at. Then I have Mike Evans. We have the Godwin injury, the McMillan injury. Evans just keeps chugging along, giving you like wide receiver 10 seasons. Like him here as a high-end wide receiver 2. Then I have Xavier Worthy, high floor, low ceiling, nice end to last year, but not someone who I think is like a guaranteed hit, but you could be looking at the wide receiver 1 on a bounce back Chiefs offense. I like taking the swing here. Garrett Wilson, lower than consensus. I just struggle to envision like the outcome or like how the season plays out where you're looking back on it and you're like, man, I really regret not drafting Garrett Wilson. Like he could be fine. He could be the wide receiver 15 in points per game, but like someone paint me the picture where Garrett Wilson is like a league winner, the guy you needed to bring home that championship. I'm just not seeing it. Even last year, he was peppered with targets. He got the volume, still was not a wide receiver 1 in points per game. Now you're going to have an offense that's going to be way more run heavy. They're not going to be a high scoring unit. I don't know. I just struggle to see it. I like the player. I think he's talented, but tough for me to be all in here on Garrett Wilson. Then I have Tedero McMillan, really high on this rookie. I like the fit with the Panthers. He should be their clear-cut number 1 weapon. These rookies have shown a lot of upside in recent years. Then I have George Pickens. I really like him as like the number 2 to CeeDee Lamb, where he had been the number 1 on just bad passing attacks. I like him now being like the number 2 option, being able to stretch the field with, more passing volume, playing with a competent quarterback in Dak Prescott. We have seen these situations where 2 wide receivers can end up being top 12 in points per game in the same season. I think out of all the wide receiver duos out there, I think CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens are definitely towards the top in terms of guys who could pull that off. Then I have Marvin Harrison Jr., a little bit lower than consensus. Obviously a super, talented prospect, highly touted. I just don't think the fit is great with Kyler Murray. And I'm just not sure where we're seeing like this huge leap. Like he could take a leap from last year and still be like a back end wide receiver 2. I just struggle to envision like that massive jump where he goes from like borderline unstartable in fantasy to all of a sudden he is a like must start top 12 weekly wide receiver. I could be wrong, but I just think the fit with the Cardinals with Kyler is not ideal, especially with Trey McBride, who's going to take a lot of like that easy gimme volume on the underneath. And then I have Travis Hunter. I mean, the usage reports for Hunter have been nothing short of fantastic. You have Liam Cohen talking about how he's going to play like 80% or so of the offensive snaps. We're getting reports that he is going to be full-time on offense, kind of mix in on defense. From the preseason game, he was, playing with the ones on offense. The depth chart, he's a starting wide receiver, the wide receiver 2. On defense, I think he's like the, 4th cornerback in terms of the depth chart. So everything has gone well for Travis Hunter. He just needs to play well on offense to kind of maintain that usage. And this is me buying into the player. I think he's going to have the opportunity. I like the talent. I have him here as a back-end wide receiver 2. Now, moving into tier 6, a pretty large tier here. We have Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, and Jamison Williams. Feels like within this tier, there's not a ton of upside, but guys who you can realistically see being like back-end wide receiver twos, solid weekly starts. For Jalen Waddle, I do think Waddle has kind of like some hidden upside where I know he flopped last year, but the previous 3 seasons, he had just been a super safe, like fringe wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 option. If things don't go well with Tyreek Hill and he's banged up or he's not super productive or he becomes an issue where they have to move off of him, I think Jalen Waddle could end up being a league winner where he always had this upside where it's like if Tyreek Hill were to go down or if Tyreek Hill gets moved, kind of ages out, Waddle could step in there and be the number 1 target. And with Jonnu Smith gone, I think he does have some upside this season while also still having like, productive usage as a wide receiver 2. Then I have Terry McLaurin, and he did just get a deal done, so he's going to be returning the Commanders. That is good to see. I am a little bit sketched out about these dudes who hold out and aren't practicing. Like the Brandon Ayuk situation last year where like he's holding out, not practicing, doesn't play well to start off, and then gets hurt. So I'm still fine drafting Terry, but he's not like a priority ad for me, especially because he just doesn't come with a lot of upside. He was not a wide receiver 1 last year in points per game, despite really hitting in the touchdown department. And so if he comes back down to earth with touchdowns, I think it's a lot more reasonable. He's in like this back end fringe wide receiver 1 range, where I think he's probably going to go in drafts, not going to be a huge fan of it. Then I have DJ Moore, someone who I kind of view as like a soft fade. He does project well from Vegas, but I'd kind of just rather buy into like Rome Odunze, Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, and not pay up for like the most expensive Bears piece. But it's also possible that like, he's just the best wide receiver on this roster. He's logged a fantasy wide receiver 1 season. This Bears offense hits, and I'm like looking back at it like, why was I fading DJ Moore? Then I have DK Metcalf, clear wide receiver 1 for Rodgers. I do think he could get peppered with targets. Just tough to see a lot of upside within this offense where they're probably not going to be a super high scoring unit. Arthur Smith has liked being pretty run heavy. And then DK Metcalf also has really just had 1 season where he's shown like legit wide receiver 1 potential for fantasy. Then I have Devonta Smith, pretty much guaranteed to outperform this wide receiver 27 spot, just consistently giving you wide receiver 2 points per game. He does just lack the upside where in a low volume passing attack, playing with A.J. Brown, he's not going to be someone who's like winning your league, but very serviceable starting option for you. Then I have Zay Flowers. I think he could be a guy who's like a contender for a year 3 leap. So far, just hasn't shown a ton of upside, but even if he doesn't take a huge jump, he's not going to kill you here at wide receiver 28. Then I have Cortland Sutton. I think he's probably, peaking as like a back-end wide receiver 2. I know some people are really going to like him. I could see the potential, right? Number 1 target for Bo Nix, but when we're looking at these guys that maybe haven't shown that super high ceiling, I'm more inclined to kind of buy into the younger options who still, have room to grow, take those early season leaps. And for Cortland Sutton, like if you haven't been better than a back end wide receiver 2 in points per game at this point, it's tough for me to like truly bank on that being like a super likely outcome. After Sutton, I have another veteran wide receiver with Calvin Ridley. Obviously, real offensive concerns here for the Titans where they're like a projected bottom 5 offense, but Cam Ward could overachieve. Calvin Ridley, I think, will be a fine wide receiver 3 with upside to be, a mid to back end wide receiver 2 if things go well with Cam Ward. Then I have Jamison Williams. I just feel like last year was pretty close to his ceiling where I don't know if he's ever going to be a wide receiver who commands enough volume to be better than like that fringe wide receiver 2 area. So one of like the younger, more proven guys that I'm not as high on. This tier is fairly congested where like I'm pretty sure in my overall top 200 rankings, like they're almost just directly back to back to back in a row. So if you're like, I really like Cortland Sutton, I would not think it'd be crazy to take him over, the DJ Moores, the DK Metcalfs of the world. 2 guys left in this tier. Emeka Egbuka, I'm pretty much, fully in on Egbuka here with the Chris Godwin, slower return timetable, McMillan now out of the picture. I already loved him as a talent. I think he's going to be a stud coming in as a rookie, balling out right away. And then for Rashee Rice, looked good in the preseason game. Obviously, the elephant in the room is just the suspension where he's going to be able to play the first 4 weeks, but you've got the NFL hunting for like an 8 to 10 game suspension, which, could pretty much run right up until the fantasy playoffs. Who knows when he actually gets hit with it. It's just a tough player to want to buy in on. I guess the way that I look at it is I'd be much more willing to draft him in like softer rooms. So like in your home league, if you feel like you have a big leg up, then you can take that swing because you know you're going to get value elsewhere. But if you're in a super competitive league, like taking Rashee Rice, who could potentially miss like 6 to 8 games, that could really put you in a tough spot in terms of making the playoffs. Now looking at tier 7, another very large tier, trying to go a little bit faster with these dudes now. I have Rome Odunze, Chris Olave, Matthew Golden, Ricky Pearsall, Jerry Jeudy, Juwan Jennings, Stephon Diggs, Josh Downs, Jacoby Myers, Deebo Samuel, and Jordan Addison. For Chris Olave, for Rome Odunze first, I think he has legit upside to be the Bears wide receiver 1. He's gotten great reports out of camp. He was the most targeted wide receiver for the Bears in the preseason. Chris Olave, just a talented player. I know the offensive situation is gross, but at some point you just want to draft good football players. Then I have Matthew Golden. Wasn't a huge fan of him as a prospect, but he's gotten great reports out of Packers camp. Real opportunity to be their wide receiver 1, especially with the injury to Jayden Reed. Then I have Ricky Pearsall, not fully sold that he's just like a really good NFL wide receiver, but he showed some flashes towards the end of last year. This wide receiver room is wide open. You always are going to want pieces of this 49ers offense, and Ricky Pearsall definitely could be a stud this year. Then I have Jerry Jeudy. I think the news that Joe Flacco is going to be the starter is huge for these weapons. Now, you don't know how long it's going to last, but that could be very fun for Jeudy. He had very extreme splits last year with Winston at quarterback versus Winston out. Flacco was like the Winston of that offense the year before, where once he came in, David Njoku all of a sudden, went on an absolute heater. Without Flacco, Njoku was not doing a ton for you. Then I have Juwan Jennings. I think he's a fun pick. Expected to be ready week 1. Had been banged up, but also had a contract dispute. So, who knows how limited he actually was. But super productive last year. Was, a top 24 wide receiver, especially just in the games where he was locked in as the starter. Then at wide receiver 40, I have Stephon Diggs. Kind of a tough guy to evaluate. In his 30s, coming off a torn ACL, but could be lined up to be the number 1 weapon on an offense that I do think could overachieve here with Drake May. I am very high on Josh Downs. I just think he's a really good player. I think Daniel Jones coming in is pretty solid for him. This dude was the wide receiver 28 in points per game last year on just an awful passing attack. I really like Josh Downs. I'm going to be higher than consensus. You don't need to draft him this high, but like if I had one league, this is how I would rank him. And then I have Jacoby Myers, who I do have taking a hit after he just requested a trade. I was pretty high on Jacoby Myers. I want to say I had him in like the Chris Olave, Matthew Golden range, but this is not great. Like if this was early in the offseason, I'd feel better about it. But now it's like, is he playing week 1? Are they going to heavily feature someone who's requesting a trade and Watt's out? I don't know. So I did move him down. He was never a super high ceiling option, but the calling card was just a super safe floor. That floor seems a little bit sketchy now with this, potential trade request up in the air. 2 more guys in this tier, Deebo Samuel, Jordan Addison. Not fully sold that Deebo isn't, really declined after last year, but it's going to be in a good offense. Someone who can be used creatively, interesting option. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Jordan Addison. A little bit lower on Addison than consensus. Obviously has the suspension, but even without the suspension, he's been very buoyed by touchdowns in his first 2 seasons where he has just way overproduced like his expected touchdown total. So it's made his point per game numbers look a little bit better. I think his floor is sketchy if he's not running hot with touchdowns. He's got a rookie quarterback, a little bit, uncertain there. TJ Hawkinson may be more established this season. Just not sure what the upside is. Plus, you also have to factor in, the missing games. And then tier 8, this is our second to last tier. Khalil Shakir, Jayden Reed, Darnell Mooney, Jaden Higgins, Chris Godwin, Keon Coleman, Michael Pittman, Cooper Kupp, Luther Burden, Rashid Shaheed, and Brandon Ayuk. Khalil Shakir, high floor, just like literally a non-existent ceiling here for the Bills. Jayden Reed, I really like Jayden Reed, but him being banged up, not a certainty to play week 1. That is not ideal, especially when you have Matthew Golden kind of balling out in training camp. Darnell Mooney dealing with a shoulder injury. Not sure what his status is right now for week 1, but a guy who I think is going to be a very solid flex option week after week. Even at this point, like it feels late. There's just a lot of these wide receivers that maybe have a little bit more upside, but I think Darnell Mooney is a very solid pick here as a wide receiver 4. Then I have Jaden Higgins, not someone who you're going to expect production out of right away. He is still not operating in 2 wide receiver sets. That is Nico Collins. That is Christian Kirk, but I think he has the upside to earn more usage throughout the season. Typically, these rookies tend to break out in the second half. Then I have Chris Godwin. I mean, this dude was the wide receiver 2 in points per game last year, but he's banged up, likely not going to be ready week 1, coming off his second ankle surgery. And then you have the emergence of a Emeka Egbuka, who I think is just going to be really good. And so I'm just not sure like what the realistic production here is out of Chris Godwin. Then I have Keon Coleman, someone who I've been coming around on a little bit. I don't think he's going to be optimized for his skill set, like trying to win deep outside. But you have to acknowledge the upside where he's gotten great reports out of camp. People are talking about how it's like a night and day difference from year 1 to year 2. And the ceiling is just high in this Bills offense, playing with Josh Allen to potentially be his number 1 target. Up next, we have someone with a much lower ceiling, but probably a higher floor in Michael Pittman. This might even be too low because last year he was just so hindered with the back injury. But like prior to that, had been a super safe, super solid option, maybe a little bit lower on Pittman just because I am higher on Josh Downs. Also, like the ceiling is just kind of lacking here with the Colts altogether. Cooper Kupp, not super high on him. If I really wanted to nitpick, I'd have like another mini tier, but I wasn't trying to go like 10 deep with these guys. So Cooper Kupp, I do think he's past his prime, but he's going to be getting wide receiver 2 snaps for the Seahawks. Also, they paid him, so they're clearly going to have a role for him. Luther Burden, not going to be playable week 1, but someone who I really think could emerge, break out. I know there's a lot of Olamide Zaccheaus hype here. If Luther Burden cannot beat out Olamide Zaccheaus, it was never going to happen. I've actually been encouraged with what we've seen out of Olamide Zaccheaus because it proves that if Luther Burden can take over that spot, it's going to be a very, very fun role. Then we have Rashid Shaheed coming off of a season-ending knee injury. He's a talented player, a big play threat. I think the issue in like redraft managed leagues is just like, are you ever going to feel confident starting him in your lineup, especially just like on a passing attack that's not projecting super well for this season? Then I have Brandon Ayuk, going to miss significant time to start off the season, but this is still kind of a wide open wide receiver room. And then the final tier here, wide receiver 56 through 60. We have Kyle Williams, Marvin Mims, Christian Kirk, Keenan Allen, and Hollywood Brown. Kyle Williams, fun rookie in a wide open Patriots wide receiver room. Marvin Mims, someone who has not gotten a large share of the routes, but has been hyper efficient with those opportunities. With the Devon Vele trade, I think, could have an expanded role this year. We will see. Christian Kirk, like I talked about with Jaden Higgins, getting the wide receiver 2 snaps right now. We'll see if he still has any gas left in the tank. Keenan Allen, I don't think he's like a super great NFL player at this stage in his career, but someone who's probably going to come in and command volume. Obviously does have the connection with Justin Herbert. And then the final guy here, Hollywood Brown. Who knows if he's going to be productive, but you want pieces of this Chiefs offense, and he is pretty cheap. So that is going to wrap it up for my top 60. If you want the full top 200, you can find those in the description. But thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.